You're listening to a Mash Those Buttons podcast. Visit mashthosebuttons.com for a full podcast schedule.
Cargo secured. Extraction complete.
Hi, this is Chrissy from the Final Fantasy XIV podcast, Wondrous Tales. Come hang out with us every other Monday for a casual discussion of what's going on in the community and some tips to improve your in-game quality of life.
Intelligent System Analytic Computer is activated. All ISAC systems are confirmed online. Data scanned. Downloading files.
What's up, guys? You listen to episode 136 of SITREP Radio, giving you the news and other happenings in the world of The Division. This week, we are joined by a guest from the world of metal. But first, my name is Mike, and joining me are my co-hosts, Robert.
Hello.
And Luke, unfortunately, could not be here today because he had an emergency, but hopefully, all things well, he should be back on next week's episode. And finally, another co-host today, huge welcome to our guest, who is none other than Bicycle of Death.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome, dude. Thanks for joining us. Hope you guys and our listeners have had a great week, and welcome to any new listeners of the show. Right, let's get down to some news.
State of the game.
Okay, so for those of you that have been on the social medias this week, you would have seen that Ubisoft has been out there purchasing a certain company that is like the online leading company for online servers and infrastructures for gaming hosting. Hosting networks.
i3d.net.
Yes, they're able to reach like 3,000 global customers. They've got 33 data centers. I think one of them's in Japan. I saw Mab talking about this earlier. Obviously, while I've got you both here, this is a huge thing for Ubisoft and Ubisoft games, because one thing they're not always very good at is servers. Now, I've heard rumors that the Division is currently on Amazon servers. So if they've actually gone out of their way to purchase a hosting and server platform that has the capabilities of, upping what they're doing already, I think that's pretty freaking awesome. Especially, like, we play Rainbow Six, and this is a good thing for those guys, isn't it, Rob?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. But then it's also good for Division 2, isn't it?
Literally, the Division 2.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on this, Mike?
I had always thought it was kind of interesting with the Division compared to other PvP games. In the Division, you cannot actually see your latency on the server. And like with Rainbow Six, you can. And with how good the Rainbow Six servers are, like, I'm usually anywhere between 25 and 60-ish milliseconds while I'm at home. I would actually really like to know what I'm at and be able to see it on the Division servers.
Yeah, you think how many games have had latency actually displayed in them? Like, I'm thinking all the way back to like Call of Duty, like back on Modern Warfare or something like that. And you like even the green bar, we don't even get that. All we get is bad connection to player. When we're playing with Americans or Europeans,
yeah,
like even on our own servers.
I'd be curious at what like ping rate that shows up. Do you know what I mean? Whether it's like 200 milliseconds or something, whether that pops up. There's got to be some kind of...
I think it became pretty standard in PvP games even back when Half-Life was launched. I think Quake 2 had it, and I'm not sure if the original Quake had it. I actually don't remember. But it's pretty standard, so to leave that out, I'm kind of curious about that now.
But yeah, hopefully this acquisition is going to make a big difference for the Division 2, because like I said, there's been huge rumors that Amazon is currently hosting the Division 1 servers. Now, I know like the mainframe or something, going back to the old Division podcast, just before the Division came out was on about servers based in Canada, I think. I don't know if you boys remember that podcast that Hamish did with the IT guys a long, long time ago. But he was basically like, when they have to get information from the server, it's got to go all the way to like a server in Canada, then like comes back to you. That's why it takes probably so long to load into the game. It's quite clever, but I imagine it's probably changed a lot since then due to the player base dropping.
That's the main hub, right? The main hub of servers, and then there's servers closer to where you live. Otherwise,
I'd like to think so.
That would be really bad, wouldn't it?
That's some badass ping otherwise. But yeah, that's our news for this week.
It's the news.
That's the news. If it is news, I mean, read into that as much as you want. Anyway, we are joined today by the awesome Bicycle of Death. How's it going, dude?
It's going pretty well. Things have been looking up in the personal life as well as gaming and streaming. And as I told Rob while you were gone, it's actually blizzard out right now, and it actually looks like a survival game. So it's going to be interesting to see how much snow we get during this podcast.
Nice. You can go for a walkabout after the show. So for the people that don't know you, do you want to tell the people what you do as part of the Division community?
I started out with the Division. I was not a part of the community whatsoever. I followed the game since its reveal, but I never got involved in the community until late 1.6. And at that point, I discovered that the Division game streamed on Twitch, and I started following along with that. I got involved in watching some other streams, and Bon Diesel was actually the first person that I ever subbed to, and he was probably the first, second, or third podcast I watched my first day exploring that. And from there, I've been called a cheerleader in a certain aspect, and I really like promoting people that are pursuing some sort of project that they're doing. It can get pretty exhausting, and seeing people take something that they're imagining and bring it into fruition, whether it be streaming, whether it be a streamcast, podcast, writing about lore, anything. It's just seeing people take something that they love, i.e. the Division game, and sharing that passion with other people is something that's very inspiring, and I like promoting that.
Nice. Okay, we're going to go straight into a few questions that we do ask all our guests. Robert, I'm going to leave this one to you because, standard.
But it's in yellow, which means you have to read it.
Just pretend you're colorblind for today. It's fine.
What is your favorite alcoholic drink, if you drink at all?
Ironically, I haven't drank since I was 16, save for the past 6 months prior to October. And it was actually my dermatologist that suggested that I start trying to consume alcohol to see if it would clear up my psoriasis. And
hang on a minute. A doctor told you to get drunk?
Not get drunk, just to consume alcohol to give my liver something to do. Because whether you believe it or not, my aunt was she worked in the medical field in the U.S. Air Force, and she told me that Wisconsinites drink so much that when they join the military, they're automatically red flagged as alcoholics. So take that as you will, but being from Wisconsin and coming from a family that consumed a lot of alcohol and not doing it myself, my doctor thought that maybe consuming alcohol might help with my psoriasis a little bit, because apparently there's a lot of skin conditions that originate from the liver, such as jaundice. And it changed the way my psoriasis worked, but it didn't necessarily make it better, so I dropped that. So to answer your question, local Point Brewery has a Point Special Lager, and that was my favorite in those 6 months.
Nice.
Can Rob have the number for your doctor?
Yeah, I was about to ask him.
I can definitely give you her office number.
Oh, it's a she, even better.
Yes.
What is your favorite type of cheese?
Ooh, Wisconsin, land of the dairy. I'm pretty much a simpleton here. I like my pepper jack cheese. Any
Nice.
sort of spicy cheese is good cheese. But so far, I haven't had a cheese that I wouldn't eat. I like all cheeses.
If you were on death row, what would you choose as your final meal?
I wouldn't have a final meal. I
Okay.
would pass.
That's brutal. What's the meaning behind that?
It's just kind of pointless. It's like, hey, yeah, we're gonna off you. Here's your final meal. What would you like? That food's gonna be wasting anyway.
Yeah, it's meaningless at that point, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not gonna waste taxpayers' money.
Fair enough. Who is your favorite recording artist or band?
How long do you want this podcast to be?
I know. We've had several.
I knew this was going to be a bit of a loaded question.
Currently, let me open up.
This is the bit, like,
my
even though
audio
we
player
listen to
right
like
here.
some heavier stuff, whether we're even on the same wavelength.
I would have to say that my favorite recording artist or band would have to be a two-person music project out of Austria called Summoning. And they are identified as a black metal / epic metal band. And all of their music, I think they've put out about 10 albums now. And they just recently released one last year. They started in the early mid-90s, and all of their music is based on J.R.R. Tolkien lore. So if you're a Lord of the Rings fan...
Oh, wow. That sounds amazing.
I quite like it.
I'm gonna have to check that out because I want to know what something based on Tolkien's lyrics are. If you know what I mean. If they literally like sum up the whole trilogy of Lord of the Rings in
there are albums about that, yeah.
Sweet.
Their music has changed stylistically significantly since their first release. Their first release was a lot like black metal, but you listen to their latest like 2, maybe even 3 albums where it sounds more of something that you would play in like a Zelda game.
I'm trying to think what would be like a choice that you wouldn't want people to know about that you listen to.
If you go
guilty
through
pleasure, you mean?
Yeah.
Guilty pleasure? Oh, I don't really believe in guilty pleasures. There's a reason to appreciate everything. Like you take a look at gaming, and I like really mathematically complex games. So that's why I like The Division, because of the gear bonuses and such. But at the same time, I could go back and play the original Super Mario Brothers and still enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's simple. But if you go through my record collection, you'll see like black metal bands, death metal bands, punk rock, and then you'll come across stuff like Alanis Morissette. So, Alanis, you're my guilty pleasure.
Why am I thinking Alanis Morissette was God?
She was.
She was God.
Dogma.
Yes.
Dogma. Yeah. I was like, I'm going to throw that out there, but I can't remember if that's correct or not.
Yes, it
I
is.
was like, yeah, you've got like a ton of vinyls as well, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Roughly.
That's a pretty sweet collection, dude.
I don't mean to be pretentious, but I don't get to talk about my records a lot. So I legitimately have just shy of 1,000 records.
Damn.
It's like 951 right now, I believe. I like my music. And I like physical copies.
It's always a good thing to have physical copies. I kind of have that with books. When people start reading ebooks, I'm like,
Yep.
It's not the same. Sorry, but it's not the same.
I have a question for you about that. How do you feel when people say they've read a book when they listen to the audiobook?
It depends. It depends how, to me, that depends how the audiobook is. Because, like, we've listened to Star Wars audiobooks where they're, like, a bit more theatrical.
Mm-hmm.
That's a difficult one.
Do you consider it reading?
Technically, it's not, but sometimes.
Yeah. That's the conversation I like to have with people.
Yeah, I mean, we used to listen to a lot of audiobooks before we listened to podcasts, and really got into podcasts.
I think if there's some books like work well as audiobooks. I mean, I know I wouldn't have read Cloud Atlas unless I had listened to it, because the first chapter in that book is just, what the fuck?
It reads as jargon because they're trying to speak in Old English, aren't they? But as it kind of progresses through, it gets so much better. But having someone talk through it, I mean, you think The Dark Tower, how many people have read the book versus listened to it? That's a slog and a half to get through those books.
Have you ever read The Wheel of Time?
I haven't, but I heard it's a very good series to read. And I know they're basing a new series on it or something. Some
of the spots in there are an absolute nightmare to read just because it's so mundane, but those mundane moments are so critical to the story that I suggest the audiobooks. But there's 13 of them.
Well, I read, I think there's 13, a series of unfortunate of events. I listened to most of them, and they're pretty dire, so I could try it. Rob, over to you, dude.
Crap. What is your favorite current TV show?
Current TV show. Well, I have Netflix and Hulu accounts, so I would have to say that my favorite thing to watch consistently is probably the animated Archer series.
Yes. Someone else that actually watches Archer.
I don't think people realize how intricate the jokes are and how great the writing is in that show. It's some of the stories are a little ridiculous, but all the little tidbits of humor and how they segue into one another, and then it the comedy in it is just genius.
The comedy on that series is so always on point. But his the guy that does his voice, there's a voice in King Julian as well. All Hail King Julian, and I'm just like, what? He's doing a voice of a crab in that, but it's pretty much the same character. It's it's awesome.
In the US, in the US, he does commercials for a fast food chain called Arby's right now, and it's when I hear it on the radio, it just makes me chuckle. It's just come on, man, you're supposed to be Archer. We've got sandwiches.
I can't imagine it. I'm gonna have to have a look. I'm gonna have to look that up. What was your first gaming system?
First gaming system that I owned was an original Nintendo NES, and that was either in the late 80s or early 90s. The first one that I actually played was an Atari 2600.
Nice one.
What is the one thing you can't live without?
Music.
Yeah, I thought that might be the answer.
I cannot live without music. There's it's such a variety of it out there, and there's music that can bring you out of bad moods. There's music that can motivate you. There's music that it's capable of completely changing your state of mind.
If you had the choice between, because I know you BMX, so BMX or music, which would you choose? That was the last thing you could ever choose between.
I would kill the person that made me make that choice.
Damn. I was like, shit, I could try him, but
to me, they go kind of hand in hand. One's a mental aspect, and then the other one's transferring that mental energy into physical energy.
Yeah. What was the last decent book you read?
The last decent book that I read? Let me look up the name real quick. It was a Mass Effect book, and it was recommended to me by F-Shep. And
nice. Is it one of the recent ones from the Andromeda series?
It was the first book in the series.
Oh, what, the older ones? Was it one of the older ones?
It was Mass Effect Revelation.
Yes.
By Drew Karpyshyn.
One of the best writers.
And the reason why she recommended it is because she is a huge Mass Effect nerd. And I tried playing the series. I couldn't do it on my own time. I tried doing it on stream. I streamed about maybe a total of 8 hours for it. And the story's intriguing, but I can't get past the gameplay.
Which one did you play first?
The first one.
Oh, you should just skip that one.
Skip that one. Go to the second.
I heard that a lot.
Like the first one's good, but the second one really does kind of like not dumb down and simplify it. It just makes it a lot easier with like the RPG mechanics and that. It just makes them a lot more accessible, and it's less sluggish. It's just overall a really good game, and you can go straight into it. Like pick all the big major plot choices from the first game. You can look for like a recap on YouTube, and then play the second and third game. Maybe
might have to do that.
Don't play Andromeda. I don't know. That's up to you.
We'll see if I make it that far.
Well, we were like, oh, dude, like Drew Karpyshyn's, behind Mass Effect Andromeda, and then we found out that basically he left months before the release of that game. So you probably find his story got cut down, and he wrote the first trilogy. So we tried to get Luke on board, who's never played Mass Effect before. We're like, dude, Andromeda's going to be amazing, and then it came out. It's like, oh, this is not what we thought it was going to be.
Sorry, Luke.
Yeah, sorry. If you had one chance to replay a game as if you've never played it before, what would that game be?
Put on the spot with that question. And the funny thing is I've heard the question on this podcast lots of times, but I never thought about actually answering it myself.
The funny thing is it does catch people out, especially when they've they're on as guests, and yeah, same thing happens to other people as well. So you're not the only one.
I would have to go with Baldurs Gate 2 Shadows of Am on the PC, which was an American RPG game made by Black Isle Studios. It was an isometric 2D RPG, and I was just talking about this, I think, last night. I think the best playthrough I had of that game was roughly 260 hours.
Damn. Like that's quite a few years old as well. So
yeah, it
that's
was released
sort of time in an old game. Yeah. We used to know a Polish guy that loved is it Baldurs Gate 2? He loved that game to death. Do you remember Christoph, Rob?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, he was like, anytime I saw him, he was just like, have you played Baldur's Gate 2 yet? I was like, no, not had a chance yet. And he just kept on about it.
There's so many Easter eggs, and the writing in that story is completely amazing. And what some people might not know is Black Isle Studios. Terry Spear used to work for them, and he was on the team for Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2, which was his first released game, which is actually how I quote-unquote met the guy.
Oh, nice, man.
So it's kind of interesting having that whole gaming interest go 360 from casually talking to him every once in a while, and then The Division comes out, and I think it was during 1.3, like I made this huge shit post about the game on Facebook that was like 7 paragraphs long about how it had such great potential and how it's in such a terrible state. And he just responded to it. He's like, "I'm really sorry you feel that way. We've put a lot of heart and soul into it." I just kind of lowered my head, and I felt so shameful. It was like, I had no idea that one of my Facebook friends worked on this game, and here I am, just trash talking essentially his latest career move in a sense. So sorry, Terry. I learned. I'm a better person now.
Yeah, the thing is, like, gamers tend to do that, don't they? Like, they if you don't see really or understand what's going on behind the scenes, then you just kind of take it for granted, don't you? A lot of the time. And it's kind of difficult when you do know what's going on behind the scenes, because then you kind of feel like you give them a bit of a break as a result, I guess. I don't know. So it's like a catch-22, depending which side of the fence you're on, really does give you your opinion.
As developers, like they want to hear criticism. They've mentioned that on the Division game, state of the game, and the actual game community streams. They've mentioned that multiple times. They want criticism. When I talk to the developers in person, like, they want criticism. What they don't want is to be cussed out by people acting like 12-year-olds with no constructive criticism whatsoever and nothing fruitful to really offer other than your game sucks.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, the last thing that you want to give is this game's shit. They want proper feedback, not just your 2-second opinion.
The game.
I thought we weren't doing that anymore.
Sorry.
We got told off by Yannick. We're not allowed to say that anymore. Love you, Yannick. Anyway, obviously, huge Division player, and you went to PAX East as a Division star player. How did that go, man?
It was PAX West in
PAX
Seattle.
West, sorry.
And it was an absolute blast. It's not at all what I thought it was going to be. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I got to meet Denty, Macho, Buzz Lightyear. I had to think a little bit because I always call him Lightyear, and then he yells at me. And Armor for Core. And I also made some other friendships from other star players, and it was actually Exxon, a For Honor cosplayer, that got me into my latest addiction, which is Warhammer Vermintide 2. But enough about that. I don't want to go off on a tangent. It was a really good experience. It was more of a show of appreciation for my participation in the community, rather than here's the Division 2. We're going to give you some personal time with it, which is what I was kind of hoping for. But we had to wait in line with everybody else to play the Division demo, which was timed. Like, you only had 15 minutes, so trying to pry any info out of that was kind of a nightmare when you're timed and you still want to play the game, but you also want to look at the intricacies at the same time. But we also got to meet and talk with some of the developers, and Keith Evans was there, and I talked to him one-on-one for probably about 3 hours, and it was the absolute highlight of the trip. I love that guy. Without sounding creepy, I love that guy. That's all I got about that.
Was there anything else that stood out as your time there, apart from Keith? Sorry, I didn't mean to make that sound creepy.
Keith, you're my favorite part of PAX West. I need you back, Keith. I need you back. I need those conversations. Seeing what other developers also had to offer and how they interacted with their communities. Ubisoft definitely is a rise above of what other developers are doing, and the whole Star Player program, I think, is excessively beneficial to the gaming community. There's some saltiness with people that haven't gotten chosen, and I even got some messages like, "You don't deserve Star Player, this person does," and I just messaged back, I don't disagree with you, but I'm still going.
That's ridiculous.
And yeah, but
yeah.
The whole gaming culture there was pretty interesting. It was my first gaming exclusive convention, so that was an eye opener. But Ubisoft actually did not have any. They didn't have a merch table.
Really?
So I suppose that was also a standout, and we all talked about that because I would have spent probably a couple $100 on Ubisoft merch, and I was unable to.
Yeah, because we went to Gamescom in Germany, and they had quite a bit there, and that was like our first time out at anything that was really just game focused. You know, we've been to other stuff before where it's just like a couple of bits and there's gaming on the side, but it's crazy to, you know, when you go to those sort of things, it's like, you know, you're sitting at home playing a game and, you know, you have your small community online, but then you go to these huge gaming conventions. It's like, holy shit, a lot of people know about this game or are interested in this game. And then the whole community around all the other games, the atmosphere is such a good feeling, you know, when you kind of walk away. As exhausting as it is, you know, you're spending a couple of days walking around with all those people and drinking lots of beer, if I remember right, Rob.
Yeah.
If you remember right.
So how many times did you play The Division then?
How many times?
The demo. How many
at
times?
PAX West?
Yeah.
I played it 4 times. So it would have been a total of an hour that I got to spend on the demo.
Thoughts?
I'm going to try not to sound like a Division fanboy, and that's going to be really difficult to do.
But
the Division 2, everything that I have criticized in the first one, or even the things that I wasn't critical of, the Division 2 does it better. It feels like you're playing the Division. It feels refined. Some people said that it looks like it plays slow. However, it plays more tactical. The sense of urgency is still there when you're in combat, so it's not like you're going to sit in cover and be bored for 5 minutes while you try to take down an elite enemy. When you're playing with 4 players, it's amazing how much sniping helped. I think in the demo, sniping kind of overshadowed all the other gameplay variants in it, and we kind of brought that up, and it was stated that there were some more balancing to do, and the sniper rifles were definitely a little OP in the demo. But on a side note for that, I might just save that for a later question if it comes up. If not, I'll bring it at the end regarding the Division engine and the servers and stuff like that, because I don't want to go off on a tangent. Because I will.
That's fine, man. What would you say is your, like, the, you know, you had 4 attempts. You played it 4 times. What was your favorite specialization to use?
My favorite specialization was the survivalist with the crossbow. And when my first run as the survivalist, I did not play the sharpshooter. Everybody else was really into playing the sharpshooter. I didn't want to, so I played the survivalist twice. And that was the second playthrough that I did was with a survivalist, and I completely forgot how to use the ultimate ability, to use your essentially the class weapon. And what happened there was I was clicking the left and right bumpers like you would in Classic Division, where you actually have to weapon switch to your new weapon. And I'm sitting there trying to figure this out, and this girl walks by in Cammy cosplay from Street Fighter 2. So I'm not sure if you know who Cammy is, but she wears a one-piece swimsuit with a thong back. And my testosterone was running incredibly high that day, and I got distracted and I died. And the other star players yelled at me. They're like, "What are you doing, Bike?" And then they saw me looking there like, "Oh." So I completely got distracted on how to use the survivalist the first round, but I did a lot better the second time through, and the crossbow plays really well, very well. It was the one specialization that I was most critical about, or most I don't know if suspicious is the right word. Not curious, skeptical. That's the word I'm looking for. I was skeptical on how the Division developers would implement a crossbow, and I was not disappointed once I figured it out.
Oh, that's good to hear, man. What do you think of like the huge change between the setting we have in New York currently to the openness of Washington?
I have a lot of questions about it, actually. Gameplay-wise, I think it's going to feel more open world, whereas it seemed like in Division 1, there was a lot of wasted opportunities on building landscapes that they could have used, because New York was absolutely beautiful. If you run around in single player in the light zone, there's a lot of exploration that you can do, and it just seems like nothing happens. Nothing happens at these locations. And the Division 2, just by looking at the maps that they've released, it looks like every single portion of the map is going to be consistently utilized. And I think that is significantly beneficial, not only for things to do, but also getting out of these certain areas. Because even if you're doing HVTs or search and destroy missions in the Division 1, they're all at set locations. And those set locations can get pretty redundant real quick.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we had a bit more randomization with regards to like the open world events, because I'm currently playing through like Red Dead Redemption 2, and the one thing I keep saying to people is like, it does a really good job of having this huge open world, yet you can go like 2 minutes down the road and you'll get attacked by someone or something. You know, it's just so random with its open world events, and if we get something similar to that in the Division 2, I think that would be really good. And obviously it makes the game more replayable as a result of that. People want to be in those areas.
100% agree.
Rob, Nathan?
No, I agree with everything you said.
What do you think of the current state of the game then?
PvE, I think the state of the game is in a very good place. I would recommend the Division to anybody who favors PvE style games, whether they're into shooters or RPGs. However, PvP, I really liked the last patch, 1.8.3. I really like the changes in it. I cannot emphasize that enough. However, since that is essentially the last patch, and that's how the game has been left, for the lack of a better word, I'm actually kind of disappointed. The changes that they made in 1.8.3 were a great snowball. If they would have kept on doing that with all the other gear sets, balancing them for PvE and PvP, continuing to make balancing changes, great things could have happened, especially with the Dark Zone. But I went from being a PvE snowflake to absolutely despising the Dark Zone to 100% loving the Dark Zone. You couldn't keep me out of it, and now it lost its touch in a sense. It feels dull having certain gear sets completely overpowering all the other ones, and it'd be nice to have more build variation, which I suppose if more players actually put different builds together, it'd be a lot more entertaining. However, knowing that you're going to go in there, you're going to face multi-grouping with people running Nomad that are using voice comms that just aren't technically in a group, so they can get that Nomad proc. It sucks. I think the D3 set is in a really good place. I think the changes that they made to Striker were really good. The Predator changes, I still think the 6-piece bonus is kind of ridiculous in the sense that you're speccing into stamina, and making yourself excessively tanky gives you a DPS bonus.
Yeah, that's something I've said for a while. Like, I would have preferred if that was firearms, and then it just had the way you stack into firearms and electronics and stamina have the curve. Basically, it just nulls out at some point, so it doesn't matter how much you stack into it. As long as you're getting 9k, you're not able to get like the full power behind it, but you're still getting the bleed, which would put you in a good place.
And I think the 6-piece bonus for the Predator piece should just be changed, because that bleed has been a in PvE, I think it's underused, especially in legendaries. It can be excessively beneficial. However, in PvP, it'd be really interesting to see, instead of, we're going to put more damage out there, it'd be nice to see more of a rock, paper, scissors formula where instead of dealing damage, it would bring something else to the game to disrupt the playstyles of other players in a different manner. And it would be nice to see like the 6-piece Predator bleed, like instead of just putting a regular bleed on there, instead of doing extra damage, it could apply like a movement speed decrease, or even a healing debuff where like if you get hit with a Predator bleed for 8 seconds, you take, like for the first 2 seconds, you gain only 10% of your potential healing, and then eventually it staggers and wears off and goes away, or just something like that. There's so many options out there, and just seeing damage explored, it's underwhelming. But at the same time, the set is excessively overwhelming and hard to deal with.
Yeah, there's been huge problems with Nomad Strikers and Predators for a long time now, and it is unfortunate that we're not going to get a patch to bring some of like the lesser known, not exactly lesser known, but the gear sets that are lower tier compared to those ones, like to bring them more in line. But obviously they're working on the Division 2. We'd all like them to work on fixing that. Maybe we'll get something post Division 2 launch, but I think for most of us it would probably be a little bit too late by then.
Yeah.
Rob,
what's your thoughts on the community, the good and the bad?
I'm going to start with the bad first, because it's not just the Division, it's gaming in general. Gamers are children. If they don't like something, they'll. I like seeing the passion, even with the negative players. I like seeing how passionate they are about a game. It's like, hey, you're this into the same game that I'm a fan of. That sense of passion and desire for it to be better is awesome. However, as we were stating before, just going in and shitposting something and saying, your game sucks, I hope you die, that it doesn't bring anything beneficial or even neutral to the table. All it does is it degrades the quality of the community and potentially degrades the gaming experience. Like if you go into the Dark Zone and you have one of those players, you're not going to have as much fun with somebody running around trash talking like that, rather than somebody who gets a good kill and they're like, GG's. 1 second. I got to open a door. Cat tried getting out of the room and closed the door instead of opened it.
Sorry.
And an aspect of the community that really annoys me, that I think the community could do better with, and I think the Division could do better with in a sense of advertisement, is the community that gets really pissed off at shock turrets. And the reason why that irritates the hell out of me is because it's often stated that the Division is an RPG first. Like, they started doing that, which I really appreciate. But you still have all of these first-person shooter players coming into the game and getting upset at the shock turret. What the shock turret is it's a method of crowd control, which in every other PvP RPG game, there's crowd control all over the place. It's a tactic. It's useful when you're coming up against a player that's using a Predator and you're able to disrupt those 10 shots to put a bleed on you that is likely going to kill you, and then they get salty that you threw down a shock turret. It's a strategy. It works. There's counters against it. You can use adrenaline now. Prevents the shock turret. There's shock resistance that decreases the amount of time that you're shocked for. With this, I have to say that I really approve and appreciate getting rid of the shock turret so far in the Division 2 when we saw those new skills come out and being replaced with, can't remember the name of it, that sticky foam. Because with that, the player actively has to choose a target, and it isn't just something that you throw down and boom, it's multiple stuns. So that I really appreciate from the PvP aspect, but I would actually like to see more methods of crowd control, like movement speed decrease. I think would be really beneficial. Stuns are obviously beneficial. World of Warcraft deals with crowd control very well. I imagine the developers have looked into that, or some of them know about it. I know there's a huge following that plays it, but that I just went on a tangent. And I just
that's cool.
And some of the benefits is the Division community has been excessively generous, and I'm sure it's noticed in other communities, and it's in other communities, but the amount of synergistic community support, especially among streamers, has been immense. Like it's such a beautiful thing. People promoting each other, nobody getting salty over, people streaming at the same time, rating each other, people promoting other people's creative outlets, like with Bon and his Words with Bon, his EchoCast. I have no idea how that guy works a full-time job, has retained a relationship, and still releases all that that Division content.
Yeah, not many people can do that. A lot of people go through some shit as a result of doing stuff like that. So,
yep. Yeah. Also, shout out to Bay Diesel, his wife, for being so supportive of that. And just the amount of community support and how willing players are to help one another to clear the shields, clear content. It's good. It's a good thing.
Yeah, we said about this I think the other week with Boris, and you can definitely see that the remaining people now, they're not the same people that were about within like the first year or two of the Division. The remaining people now are the hardcore players, the people that love the Division, no matter what has happened over the life cycle of the game. And it leaves us with this like really cool, tight knit community that is willing to help each other out, but kind of keeps the game alive at the same time. It's really good because we said the other week, Reddit is a huge example. That Reddit page has done like a huge 180 compared to what it was maybe a year ago, or the minute any huge announcements were made with regards to like the Division 1. There was always like a lot of salty people on there. So it's nice to see that kind of change for it. Moving on. Obviously, the big news we're all waiting for, the Dark Zone. What are things that you don't want to see in the Dark Zone for the Division 2? I know you talked about shock turrets being a pain in the ass, so they're not coming back from what we know yet. We don't know yet, so we'll see.
I don't want to see a PvE only Dark Zone. I do not want to see a passive mode in the Dark Zone. I love PvE content. I love the fact that other games out there put in that option. However, putting in the option for a PvE Dark Zone or a passive mode, I think it detracts. It causes less elements to focus on what the Dark Zone could be by pulling people off to work on balancing or making a PvE Dark Zone possible. And granted, there are people that would utilize that, and I acknowledge that. I respect the opinions of the people who desire a PvE Dark Zone, but the Dark Zone makes the Division unique, and I think meddling with that isn't a good idea. Rogue 2.0 initially to me sounded like a great idea, a fantastic idea, but Rogue 2.0 compared to the original Dark Zone elements is, I might be over-exaggerating it, but it's kind of a disaster. It's still fun. It's still fun. I like some of the elements in it, like the manhunt stations. There are definitely improvements that could be made on it. But the lack of friendly fire with the grenade spam, and I think there's a better balance between Rogue 1.0 and Rogue 2.0 that could be discovered. And as many mistakes or missteps that the Division developers have made throughout the life cycle, I really don't think that they're going to disappoint.
We just got a couple of weeks to wait now till we actually get some news on hopefully what is actually happening in the Dark Zone. But whether that includes rogue status and how that is obtained is anyone's guess.
I have a question for you folks.
Ooh.
Do you think that since we're actually closing in on the release date, do you think that the Dark Zone information is going to be released as the same time as a beta? Or no?
I'd hope not. I want mysticism. Otherwise, well, as we've spoken about this recently, before Division came out, we were on a podcast about it. We didn't dissect it at all. So as soon as that beta is going to come out, we're going to dissect it, and it's probably going to ruin our view on the game a little bit. So the little I know about it, the better, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
But then the information that's given and actually playing it and how that plays out is going to be completely different. You can sit down and speculate how certain things are going to play out, but the one thing that we all know about the Dark Zone, and the one thing I assume that we all love about the Dark Zone, is the fact that every time you go in there, the instances varied. Like, you never really got the same thing twice, apart from the nights where, you end up with chicken dancing and multi-group and stuff like that, which I'm sure we don't all enjoy. I think you could be right with regards to the beta, but I think the most we might get is probably news on when the beta will drop. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, by then we're going to be, 3 months out? I would assume it's going to be about the third week in December. Could be earlier, but we'll have to see. I just hope there's a dedicated stream to it to explain clearly to those people that will rage over certain things with regards to the Dark Zone, the ins and outs of it, so to speak. I don't want to see everything, but yeah.
It will be expected to be in the beta, though, won't it? Because it was in the original.
Yeah.
Correct.
So, yeah, if they don't, then it's going to cause hassle.
Do you boys want that feeling back of going in the Dark Zone and it being a risk again, though, compared to what we have now?
Yeah.
Hands down, yes.
That is the biggest change I do think that the Division 2 needs to make with regards to Dark Zone PvP.
It's that tension, that's what it's all about.
How do you change that at endgame, though? When you have all the gear, how do you bring that tension back?
I suppose it's the whole point of, are you the biggest, baddest person in the Dark Zone or not? And it's going to be that kind of anonymity that is going to...
It just has to be more points of conflict. Like, they did really well with adding supply drops and stuff, but they didn't really work as intended. And the underground contamination zones were good as well, but again, didn't really work as intended. Well, they do, but they're not. I guess they're put in to create conflict, but it's not if you're there first. I don't know what I'm talking about.
I do agree with regards to the supply drops. The supply drops were supposed to be decent loot, You know, you were supposed to get decent loot obtained from that, which obviously over time was kind of pointless, but having so many on the map maybe reduced that kind of tension, because if you had maybe one or two compared to how many they actually have at the minute, then that tension's going to be more increased, because you would assume there's going to be more people headed for the same supply drop. So you need to get there first. Whereas like currently you probably get one or two people turn up, you know, to supply drops in the game.
Yeah, and I don't think you get to see where the supply drops land before they actually do land. So there's no time for people to actually go to those locations. It's just a matter of, okay, they dropped here, we need to get here immediately, take it out, and move on to the next. So there's really no congregation of the conflict.
Yeah.
It's just RNG.
Yeah, and they also dropped in the same places all the time, so people knew where they were. So it's having that, you know, spontaneousness to the Dark Zone that would make it a little bit better, I guess. I don't know. Robert.
Yeah. What's up?
Over to you.
What do you think about the skills in Division 2?
There was, after I read the dev blog and saw what was actually coming out, I really appreciated the fact that every skill that they listed, save for one, had some sort of armor repair. I think that's really going to enhance the build diversity that a notable portion of the community has complained about, because in the Division 1, if you were going to play a healer, you had two options, and that was essentially it. Now there's a lot more options. With that, there's going to be, I would hope there's going to be a greater allowance for variance in where certain skills are, especially healing skills, are going to be a lot more useful in certain situations where you're not going to want to stick with a certain build. You might want to explore around a little bit more. It was also stated that those are only some of the skills that are coming out, and there was a lack of a pulse on what they released. However, there was with a drone that would also fly around and acquire targets, which in a sense is a pulse.
That was the tactician one, I think.
I believe so. And the pulse is, it's kind of what, when you think of a division skill, it's pretty much my go-to skill on almost every character that I play. I love the pulse. It does some pretty amazing things. And I think, going off on a tangent again, I think the pulse skill has the greatest potential out of any other skill in the game, in the sense of having some sort of a gear set or exotic pieces that alter the way it plays. Something that I would like to see is a pulse that possibly emits an EMP pulse at the same time, but doesn't work 100% of the time. Maybe have it so, like the tactician set, where you build stacks, and however many stacks that you build, when you release the pulse, whatever skill that pulse hits has that percentage of a chance to temporarily disable it. And I don't know where else I was going with that. I had an idea and it just fluttered away.
No, that sounds good.
So you're all for the pulse making a comeback in the Division 2?
Yes.
Yeah, it's quite funny because I did see a few people be like, is this it? Is this all the skills we get in the Division 2? And Thylander was straight on Twitter like, don't worry, guys. Don't worry. There's more coming. So,
yep.
Yeah, we know there's going to be a
tight.
shield, because it was like shield resilience or something, wasn't there, on one of the mods?
Mm-hmm.
Was that? Because I know on last week's episode, me and Luke were like, there has to be a shield in it, because it's I think it's the only skill that deserves to make a comeback because of its role in the game itself. It's a tank class, and without the shields, what would be the tank class? You know, I don't know. Maybe I'd like to see a variant of the shield, not what we have now, something completely different, which I'm sure we'll get. I mean, half these skills have been redesigned apart from the turret and the seeker mines. I know they're like slightly different variants now. Me and Luke did discuss that we kind of hope that the incinerator flame turret, which is the new flame turret coming for the Division 2, it actually has like a red canister on the back of it, so we were wondering if that's like the weak point, and if it actually explodes, it's going to cause damage to the, like, if you're in PvP and you kill someone's bloody turret, well, you're going to cause that team damage. That'd be quite cool.
That's interesting.
You just won me over there. That needs to be in the Division 2, or I'm not buying it.
Rob,
just kidding.
I know you went on last week's podcast. What do you think of the skills? Like, do you like the fact that there's different variants? You've got offensive, you've got defensive, and I know you've got mostly armor repairing skills, but I'm pretty sure there's just one health skill.
Yeah, no, it kind of adds to that build diversity, doesn't it? Because no matter how your playstyle is, you can pick whatever skill you want and still use. Do you know what I mean? Like, use that skill. Like you just pick which one of you prefer, and then you can have that whatever way you want. It's going to be good.
What do you think about the fact that a couple of skill variants are actually tied to specializations this time around?
Yeah, no, they make the ones that they've picked make sense. I think there might have been one that doesn't really make much sense, but I can't remember what it is at the top of my head. No, can't remember.
No, it's fine. No, I just thought I'd grab your thoughts quick because I know you weren't.
Yeah, I wasn't on last week, was I? Stupid work.
Yeah, unfortunately, dude. Finally, dude, what do you think the teams at Ubisoft and Massive could do to bring the community together more?
I think that the developers could actually host community events. The community has been really good at creating these events that, in a sense, shouldn't really be possible. You take a look at Survival Saturdays and the tournaments. Like, we don't have dedicated servers. Like for the survival tournaments, FShep and Splinter Shield have done such a great job at utilizing the queuing mechanics to make these tournaments possible, and they have been an absolute blast. If there was some way, shape, or form that the developers could make these sort of events easier, or even make it so that like the developers themselves would have to host these events, I think it would pull in a greater audience. Because even looking at the survival tournament viewing numbers, it's crazy. Like, if you look at the Division channel in Twitch while these tournaments are taking place, and you look at the total number of it, and then you take a look at the number of the viewers actually watching the tournament, it is a fantastic way to promote the game. But this is just something that the community is doing, and when the community goes about promoting it, it's only reaching people that pretty much already know about these events. So if there is even some way to promote the community events to a larger audience, it would be a great advertisement tool for the game.
Yeah, even if they said something on the state of the game every week, it would be pretty good, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
This is another plea, I guess, for actually having private matchmaking in the Division 2. Something we've requested for about 2 years for the Division 1, because to have private matchmaking for something like Last Stand, Skirmish, and obviously, FShep and Splinter Shield doing an awesome job with the Survival Saturdays, Survival, I would love to have private matchmaking for that. It would just make that so much easier. I know that the community are finding ways to do these things. We did it back in the day in Destiny, didn't we, Rob? When they used to run, I can't remember the bloody name of it. Sweaties in Destiny, PvP. But yeah, no, that's a really good idea.
Especially now that the clans are coming into the game.
Yes, I'm very interested to see what is going to happen with clans.
Like clan v clan.
I want to see that happen. Right. Thank you very much for joining us this week, Bicycle. Or Bike.
It has been an absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing and the fact that you guys have stuck with the game and haven't abandoned it. It's beautiful, and I sincerely thank you. It makes my drives to work on Mondays and back on Thursdays a hell of a lot more enjoyable. I legitimately cannot thank you enough for that, the personal enjoyment, as well as adding this type of content to the community. So hats off to you guys.
Thank you very much, man.
Do you want to tell all the listeners where they can find you on all the social spaces?
If you're interested in the streaming aspect, it's twitch.tv, Bicycle of DTH. Bicycle of Death was actually taken by a World of Tanks player, and that account is hopefully becoming vacant soon. But if you search for Bicycle of Death on Google, I'm the only one that comes up ever. So that's interesting. For announcements and a little bit of personal stuff, twitter.com/Bicycle of Death, all spelled out, all one word. And if you're more interested in the record collecting and bicycle aspect, Instagram.com, Bicycle of Death, all spelled out, all one word.
Thank you, man. And you should definitely go check them out on all those places. Robert, where can the listeners find us?
You can find us over at SITREP Radio on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, as well as our personal accounts. Send any questions or feedback for the show to sitrepRadiopod@gmail.com, or you can find us on Discord. The link will be in the show notes. I want to hear your thoughts on the news and topics we cover in the show, so please leave a comment and join the discussion in any of those places.
Awesome. Please leave a review of the show using the podcast app of your choice. We genuinely do enjoy reading them all. All the feedback is excellent, and at the end of the day, it does actually help other people to help find our show. And if you listen all the way to the end of the show, you will hear all the juicy details about the other awesome shows that are available on the Mash Those Buttons network. We do live stream as often as we can, so if you're interested in dropping by and chatting with us whilst we play The Division and some other games, you can find us all over at twitch.tv/SITREP Radio. We have been SITREP Radio. Thank you very much for listening this week, agents, and we will catch you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for choosing a Mash Those Buttons podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you'd like to subscribe to one of our shows, you can find us on multiple podcast platforms across iOS and Android. Just search for the show on a podcatcher like Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts and hit subscribe. If you can't find us on your favorite podcast platform of choice, just go right to the mashthosebuttons.com website, grab the RSS feed, and put it into your podcatcher of choice. If you want to check out some other podcasts you may enjoy, you should check out mashthosebuttons.com/shows. For World of Warcraft fans, we have two podcasts, WoW Talk, which is our news and community podcast, and The Torn and the Goblin, which is our lore and story podcast. If you enjoy Overwatch, make sure to check out Watchpoint Radio to keep up with the latest on Overwatch and its community. If you enjoy fighting games, make sure you check out Double Tap for the latest in the FGC. If you're a fan of The Division or looking forward to The Division 2, make sure you check out SITREP Radio. If you want to keep up with the latest at Mash Those Buttons, you can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/mtbsite, facebook.com/mashthosebuttons, and youtube.com/mashthosebuttons. We'd also like to have you join our Discord community, so just go to discord.me/mashthosebuttons and join us for a chat. Once again, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. You're listening to a Mash Those Buttons podcast. Visit mashthosebuttons.com for a full podcast schedule.
Cargo secure.